season Bo good? I've heard it is, actually.
In the shadowy world of organized crime, there is one rule that supersedes all others. You never touch the family. But on a rainy Tuesday in Chicago, a drunken heavyweight broke that rule, targeting a terrified 6-year-old boy in a crowded restaurant. He didn't know the boy was the only son of Darian Valenti, the city's most ruthless capo. He also didn't expect the person to stand up to him wouldn't be a bodyguard, but a trembling 23-year-old waitress named Tess. What happened in the next 5 minutes didn't just shatter glass, it shattered the entire underworld hierarchy. This is the true story of how a spilled drink led to a war, a romance, and a shocking revelation that no one saw coming. The Onyx Room wasn't the kind of place where people went to eat. It was the kind of place where people went to be seen spending money. The lighting was low, the velvet booths were deep red, and the air smelled of expensive cigars and fear. Tess Holloway adjusted her apron, her fingers trembling slightly. It was her third double shift in a row. Her feet throbbed in her cheap black flats, but she needed the tips. Rent for her studio apartment in the crumbling side of Cicero was 3 days late, and her landlord, Mr. Henderson, wasn't known for his patience. Table 4 needs a refill on the scotch. The 30-year-old bottle, the floor manager, a sweaty man named Greg, hissed at her as he passed. And don't look them in the eye, Tess. You know who that is. Tess nodded, keeping her head down. She knew. Everyone knew. Table 4 was occupied by men who didn't exist on paper, but controlled half the shipping yards in Illinois. But tonight, the tension in the room wasn't coming from the usual suspects. It was coming from Table 9. At Table 9 sat Richard Rick Hayes, the son of a prominent state judge. He was loud, obnoxious, and 3 bottles of wine deep. He had been harassing the staff for an hour, but because of his father's connections, Greg refused to kick him out. "Hey, sweetheart!" Hayes yelled, snapping his fingers at Tess. "Where's my steak? I ordered it rare, not raw." Tess took a deep breath, pasting on her customer service smile. "I'm checking on it right now. Sir, the kitchen is just—" "I don't care about the kitchen." Hayes slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. Tess flinched, retreating toward the server station. As she turned, she noticed something that made her pause. A small boy, no older than 6, was wandering near the aquarium that separated the dining area from the VIP lounge. He was dressed in a miniature suit that cost more than Tess's car, clutching a toy robot. He looked lost. The boy, Noah, had slipped away from his distracted bodyguards in the VIP section. He was fascinated by the lobsters in the tank. As he backed away to get a better look, he accidentally bumped into Hayes's chair. It was a light bump, barely a nudge. But to a drunk man looking for a fight, it was a declaration of war. Hayes spun around, his face flushed purple. "Watch it, you little brat!" Noah's eyes went wide. He froze, clutching his robot to his chest. I'm sorry," he whispered. "Sorry?" Hayes stood up, swaying unsteadily. The restaurant went quiet. "You made me spill my wine on a $2,000 suit." He hadn't spilled a drop, but facts didn't matter to men like Hayes. He loomed over the child, raising a heavy hand. "I ought to teach you some manners." The bodyguards in the VIP section were moving, but they were too far away. They were stuck behind a partition of glass. Noah cowered, squeezing his eyes shut, waiting for the blow. It never came. A blur of black uniform and white apron shot across the aisle. Tess didn't think. She didn't calculate the risk. She just saw a child about to be hit by a grown man, and her instincts, honed by a childhood she tried hard to forget, took over. She threw herself between Hayes and the boy, shielding Noah with her own body. Crack! Hayes's backhand caught Tess squarely on the cheekbone. The force of it knocked her sideways, sending her crashing into a busboy's cart. Glasses shattered. Silverware clattered loudly against the marble floor. The entire restaurant gasped. The silence that followed was deafening. Tess lay on the floor for a second, her vision swimming, a sharp, metallic taste of blood in her mouth. But she scrambled up instantly, ignoring the pain. She didn't check her injury. She grabbed Noah, pulling him behind her, turning her back to the aggressor to shield the child. "Don't you touch him," Tess hissed, her voice shaking but loud. "He's just a little boy." Hayes blinked, stunned that a waitress had just taken a hit meant for someone else. Then his shock turned to blind rage. He grabbed a steak knife from the table. "You stupid bitch! Do you know who I am?" Tess braced herself. She gripped Noah's shoulder tight. "I don't care who you are," she said, staring him down. "You're not hurting this child." Hayes lunged, but before he could take a step, a hand clamp, heavy and cold as iron, landed on his shoulder. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I believe," a deep baritone voice spoke from behind Hayes, calm yet terrifyingly dark. The lady said, "Don't touch him." Hayes tried to shrug the hand off, but he couldn't move. He turned around and looked up. And up. Standing there was a man in a bespoke, charcoal three-piece suit. He had dark hair swept back, eyes the color of cold steel, and a scar running through his left eyebrow. It was Darian Valenti, the owner of the Onyx Room, the Don of Chicago, and most importantly, Noah's father. Darian Valenti didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He simply radiated a lethal kind of stillness. He looked at Hayes, then he looked at Tess, whose cheek was already beginning to bruise a dark purple. Finally, his gaze landed on his son, Noah, who was trembling behind Tess's legs. "Noah," Darian said softly, "come here." The boy let go of Tess's apron and ran to his father, burying his face in Darian's expensive trousers. Darian placed a protective hand on the boy's head, but his eyes never left Hayes. "Do you know whose son you just tried to assault?" Darian asked. Hayes, sobering up rapidly, began to stammer. I didn't know. He bumped me. Look, Valenti, my father is Judge Hayes. If you touch me—" "Judge Hayes," Darian repeated, tasting the name. "A good man. A man who owes me 3 favors." Darian tilted his head. "I wonder if he'll trade one of those favors to keep you breathing, or if he'll decide he's tired of paying your bail." Hayes went pale. "Look, it was a mistake. The waitress, she got in the way." Darian released Hayes's shoulder and took a step toward Tess. The crowd watched, breathless. Tess pressed her back against the bar, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She expected to be fired. She expected to be yelled at for causing a scene in a mob boss's restaurant. Darian reached out. Tess flinched. He paused, his eyes softening by a fraction. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a silk handkerchief. He gently offered it to her. "You're bleeding, miss." "Tess," she whispered, taking the cloth. She dabbed her lip. "Tess Holloway." "Tess," Darian said, testing the name. He looked at the bruise forming on her face. A muscle in his jaw ticked. "You took a hit for my son." He was scared," Tess managed to say. "I didn't think." "Clearly," Darian murmured. He turned back to the room. He snapped his fingers. 2 men in dark suits materialized from the shadows. "Escort Mr. Hayes to the basement. I'll deal with him after dinner." "No! No! Wait!" Hayes screamed as he was dragged away, his heels scraping the marble. "My dad! You can't do this!" The doors to the kitchen swung shut, cutting off his screams. Darian turned to Greg, the manager, who was sweating profusely. "Mr. Valenti, sir," Greg stuttered. "I am so sorry. I tried to keep things under control, but that girl, she provoked him." Darian held up a hand. "Stop." "Sir." "You watched a drunk man raise a hand to a child in my establishment," Darian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And you did nothing. Then when a waitress did your job for you, you try to blame her?" I... "Get out," Darian said. "You're fired. If I see you in Chicago by sunrise, you'll join Mr. Hayes in the basement." Greg fled. Darian turned back to Tess. The adrenaline was fading, and Tess's knees finally gave out. She slumped, but Darian caught her by the elbow, steadying her. His grip was firm, warm, and startlingly gentle. "You're done for the night," Darian stated. It wasn't a question. "I can't," Tess protested weakly, pulling away. "I need the tips, my rent." Darian looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, he saw the scuffed shoes, the frayed hem of her skirt, the exhaustion etched under her eyes. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a money clip, and peeled off a stack of $100 bills. He didn't count it. It had to be at least $5,000. He pressed it into her hand. "Go home, Tess Holloway," he said. "Take care of that face." Before she could argue, he scooped Noah up into his arms and walked toward the exit, his bodyguards flanking him like a phalanx. Tess stood there, clutching the money, the silk handkerchief, and the staring eyes of 50 patrons burning into her back. She didn't know it yet, but she had just passed the most dangerous interview of her life. 3 days passed. Tess hadn't returned to the Onyx room. She used some of the money Darian gave her to pay her rent and buy groceries, real groceries, not just instant noodles. She spent the rest of the time icing her face and looking for a new job. She assumed her time at the high-end club was over. She was too associated with the drama now. On Friday morning, a knock rattled her thin apartment door. Tess froze. She looked through the peephole. It wasn't the landlord. It was a man she recognized from the restaurant, one of the bodyguards. He was older, with silver hair and a kind but stern face. This was Luca, Darian's consigliere, advisor. She opened the door a crack, leaving the chain on. "Can I help you?" "Miss Holloway," Luca said politely. "Mr. Valenti requests your presence." "I'm not in trouble, am I?" Tess asked, her stomach dropping. "I didn't talk to the police about Hayes, I swear." Luca allowed a small, dry smile. "Mr. Hayes has been handled. There is no police investigation. Mr. Valenti wants to offer you a job." "I already have a job. Well, I had one." "Not as a waitress," Luca said. "Please, the car is downstairs." Curiosity and a healthy dose of fear made her agree. She dressed in her best blouse and followed Luca to a sleek, bulletproof black SUV idling at the curb. The drive took them out of the city, past the suburbs, to the secluded estates of Lake Forest. They pulled up to a massive wrought-iron gate adorned with a V. The gate swung open, revealing a driveway that wound through manicured gardens, past fountains, leading to a mansion that looked more like a fortress. Inside, the house was silent and imposing. Marble floors, Renaissance art, and guards at every corridor. Luca led her to a library that smelled of old paper and leather. Darian was standing by the window, looking out at the grounds. He turned when she entered. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a yellowish green. "Miss Holloway," he nodded. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Valenti," Tess replied, clutching her purse. "What is this about?" Darian gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." He poured 2 glasses of water, placing one before her. "I looked into your file, Tess. Father deceased, mother in a care facility in Ohio. You dropped out of nursing school 2 years ago to pay for her medical bills. You work 60 hours a week and you're still drowning in debt." Tess stiffened. "Is it a crime to be poor, Mr. Valenti?" "No," Darian said. "It's a tragedy, especially for someone with your instincts." He leaned against the heavy oak desk. "My son, Noah. He hasn't spoken since the incident at the restaurant." Tess's defensive posture softened. "Is he okay?" "Physically, yes. But Noah has had a difficult life. His mother died when he was 2. I am a busy man. I have enemies. Noah has gone through 4 nannies in the last year. They either quit because they can't handle the isolation, or I fire them because they treat him like a job, not a child." Darian's eyes bored into hers. "You threw yourself in front of a drunk sociopath for a child you didn't know. You didn't do it for money. You didn't do it for fame. You did it because you possess a rare quality in my world, loyalty to the innocent." "I'm not a nanny," Tess said quietly. "You were a nursing student. You know first aid. You're patient. And Noah asked for you." Tess blinked. "He did?" "He drew a picture," Darian said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. It was a crayon drawing of a small boy, a tall, dark figure, Darian, and a woman in a waitress apron with a superhero cape. Tess felt a lump form in her throat. "I want you to be his live-in governess," Darian said. "Your primary job is to watch him. Be with him. Ensure he feels safe. In exchange, I will pay off your mother's medical debts in full. I will pay for her care at the best facility in the country. And I will give you a salary of $10,000 a month." Tess's mouth fell open. It was a life-changing amount of money. It was freedom. But she looked around the room, the guards outside, the security cameras, the heavy atmosphere of danger. "And what happens?" Tess asked, her voice steady, "when your enemies come for him again? Because they will, won't they?" Darian's expression darkened. He walked around the desk and stopped inches from her. The scent of sandalwood and danger overwhelmed her. "Then I expect you to do exactly what you did at the restaurant," Darian said low. "Protect him. And in return, Tess, I will protect you. No one touches what is mine." "What is mine?" The phrasing sent a shiver down her spine. He was talking about Noah, wasn't he? "I have one condition," Tess said, surprising herself. Darian raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "No secrets regarding Noah's safety. If there is a threat, I need to know. I won't walk blindly into a war zone." Darian stared at her for a long moment, assessing her. Then he extended his hand. "Deal." Tess shook it. His skin was rough, calloused. As their hands touched, a spark of electricity zapped them both. Darian pulled away slightly slower than necessary. "Welcome to the family, Tess." She didn't know it then, but she had just signed a contract in blood. And the threats to Noah weren't just coming from outside the gates. The real danger was already inside the house. Life inside the Valenti estate was a paradox. It was the safest place in Chicago, yet it felt like living inside the barrel of a loaded gun. For the first 2 weeks, Tess barely saw Darian. He was a ghost in his own home, leaving before dawn and returning long after the house had gone dark. Tess focused entirely on Noah. The boy was shell-shocked, mute, and terrified of loud noises. Tess started small. She didn't force him to talk. She simply sat on the floor of his playroom, a room filled with expensive toys that had clearly never been touched, and read books aloud. She cooked him grilled cheese sandwiches instead of the gourmet meals the chef prepared. She taught him how to tie his shoes, something his previous nannies had done for him. The breakthrough happened on a Thursday afternoon in the estate's massive garden. Tess was kneeling in the dirt, planting marigolds. Noah was watching her from a safe distance. You know, Tess said, not looking at him. Worms are actually good for the dirt. They help the flowers breathe. Noah took a step closer. He crouched down, poking the soil with a stick. He looked at Tess, then at the worm, wriggling on her trowel. Does it hurt them? Noah whispered. His voice was raspy from disuse. Tess's heart leapt, but she kept her voice calm. No. They like the dirt. It's their home. Noah smiled, a genuine small smile. Good work, Miss Holloway. Tess jumped, spinning around. Darian was standing on the patio stone path. He had discarded his suit jacket, his white dress shirt rolled up to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and ink. He looked tired, the shadows under his eyes dark and heavy. He hasn't spoken in months, Darian said quietly, watching his son play in the dirt. Not since his mother. He trailed off. He just needed someone to listen, not just watch, Tess said, wiping her dirty hands on her jeans. She suddenly felt very underdressed next to him. Darian walked over. He didn't look at Noah. He looked at Tess. The intensity of his gaze made her breath hitch. I have a business dinner tonight. At the house. My capos, my captains are coming. I need you to keep Noah upstairs. Some of these men, they aren't fit for children to see. Understood, Tess said. And Tess? Darian stepped closer. He reached out, his thumb grazing her jawline where the bruise had finally faded. His touch was electric, sending a jolt of heat straight to her core. Stay out of sight, for your own safety. That night, the mansion transformed. Black SUVs filled the driveway. Men with scarred faces and bulging jackets patrolled the hallways. From the top of the grand staircase, Tess could hear the rumble of voices in the dining room below. Smoke drifted up, thick and pungent. Noah was asleep. Tess, restless, went to the kitchen to get water. She had to pass the dining room. The double doors were slightly ajar. Through the crack, she saw them. 12 men sitting around a long mahogany table. Darian sat at the head, looking like a king among wolves. To his right sat Salvatore Sal Genovese, his underboss. Sal was a man with a smile that didn't reach his shark-like eyes. We need to hit the Moretti shipments now, Dom, Sal was arguing, slamming his hand on the table. They're disrespecting our territory in the south side. If we don't strike, we look weak. We are not striking, Darian said, his voice calm, but cutting through the noise like a razor. Not while the feds are watching the ports. We wait. Waiting is for cowards, Sal spat. The room went deathly silent. Darian slowly stood up. He didn't yell. He just adjusted his cufflinks. Sal, do you want to repeat that? Sal swallowed hard, his bravado crumbling. I just meant, we're losing money, boss. Money we can replace, Darian said icily. Blood we cannot. We wait. Tess, watching from the shadows, felt a chill. Darian wasn't just a businessman. He was a predator, keeping other predators in line. As she turned to leave, the floorboard beneath her creaked. Sal's head snapped toward the door. Who's there? 2 guards were on her in seconds, dragging her into the light of the dining room. Tess stumbled, the water glass shattering in her hand. Well, well, Sal sneered, looking her up and down. The waitress. Is this the new pet you picked up, Dom? Didn't know we were bringing stray dogs to the table. The other men laughed. Tess felt her face burn with humiliation. Darian didn't laugh. He walked around the table, the sound of his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He stopped in front of Tess. He looked at the guards holding her arms. Let her go, he commanded. They released her immediately. Darian turned to Sal. This woman saved my son's life. She has more courage in her little finger than you have in your entire body, Sal. He turned back to Tess, and in front of all his men, he took her hand. He brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles. It was a gesture of respect, of possession. "Gentlemen," Darian announced, his eyes daring anyone to object. "This is Tess. She is under my personal protection. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. And you know what happens to people who disrespect me." The silence was absolute. Sal looked down, his jaw clenched tight, a vein throbbing in his temple. "Go upstairs, Tess," Darian murmured near her ear, his breath warm. "I'll check on you later." Tess fled the room, her heart pounding. She realized two things that night. Darian Valenti was falling for her, and Salvatore Genovese wanted her dead. 2 weeks after the dinner, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The guards were doubled. Darian was sleeping less, often staying in his study until 4 a.m. Tess and Noah had developed a routine. Every morning they explored a different room in the massive mansion. On Tuesday, they found themselves in the West Wing, an area the staff usually avoided. "Let's play hide-and-seek," Noah whispered, tugging Tess's hand. "Okay, count to 10. Tess smiled. Noah covered his eyes. Tess jogged down the hallway, looking for a spot. She saw a door slightly ajar, the library service entrance. She slipped inside, crouching behind a heavy velvet curtain. She waited for Noah to find her. Instead, she heard the heavy oak door on the other side of the room open. Heavy footsteps entered. "Is the line secure?" A voice hissed. Tess froze. She recognized that voice. It was Sal. "Yeah, I'm alone," Sal said into a phone. "Listen, he's not biting on the shipment bait. Darian is too cautious. No, I can't just take him out. The men are too loyal. We need a distraction. Something that breaks him." Tess held her breath, pressing her hand over her mouth. Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "The kid," Sal said. "The kid is the only weak spot. No, the gala is next Friday. The security will be tight. But I'm running the perimeter detail. I can leave a hole. Yeah, the Grand Hotel. Back exit. Service elevator 3. You grab the boy, and Valenti will tear the city apart looking for him. He'll make a mistake, and then we take him out." Tess's blood ran cold. The gala. Next Friday. Sal was planning to kidnap Noah to lure Darian into a trap. "Done. Hail Moretti," Sal whispered, and hung up. Tess waited until the door closed and the footsteps faded. She collapsed against the wall, trembling. She had to tell Darian. She ran to his office. The guards tried to stop her, but she pushed past them. "I need to see him. Now." She burst into the office. Darian was on a conference call. He looked up, annoyed, but seeing her face, pale and terrified, he hung up immediately. "Everyone out," he barked at his lieutenants. They filed out. "Tess, what is it?" Darian rushed to her, gripping her shoulders. "Is it Noah?" "It's Sal," she gasped. "I heard him, in the library. He's working with the Morettis. They're going to take Noah at the charity gala on Friday." Darian went still, stone still. His eyes, usually a stormy grey, turned black. "Are you sure?" He mentioned service elevator 3 at the Grand Hotel. He said he'd leave a hole in the security. Darian released her and walked to the window. He stood there for a long time. When he turned back, his face was a mask of terrifying calm. "Thank you, Tess. You did good." "You have to cancel the gala," Tess said, "or fire Sal. Arrest him." "No," Darian said. "What? If I fire him now, he goes to ground. I'll never know who his contacts are. I'll never know how deep the rot goes." Darian walked to his desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a heavy, matte black pistol. He checked the chamber. "We are going to the gala," Darian said, "and we are going to let Sal think his plan is working." "You're using your son as bait?" Tess screamed. "Are you insane?" "I am using myself as bait," Darian corrected her, his voice rising. "Noah won't be anywhere near that elevator. I'm changing the security detail personally. But I need Sal to make his move so I can cut the head off the snake." He walked over to her, his expression softening. He cupped her face. "I need you to trust me, Tess. I would burn this city to ash before I let anyone hurt Noah. Or you." "And who protects you?" Tess whispered, tears stinging her eyes. Darian leaned his forehead against hers. "You do," he murmured. And then, for the first time, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, fueled by fear and adrenaline. It tasted of whiskey and danger. Tess melted into him, gripping the lapels of his suit. For a moment, the war outside didn't exist. There was only the heat of his body and the promise of his protection. When he pulled away, he looked shaken. "Get ready, Tess. Friday night, we go to war. And you're going to be by my side." The Grand Hotel ballroom was a sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and champagne. The Valenti Charity Gala was the social event of the season, a way for the family to wash their dark money and look like pillars of the community. Tess wore a floor-length emerald gown Darian had bought for her. It had a slit up the thigh that concealed a jagged knife strapped to her leg. Darian insisted on it. "Smile," Darian whispered, his arm wrapped tight around her waist. He looked devastating in a tuxedo, but his eyes were scanning every corner of the room. "I feel like I'm going to throw up," Tessa muttered through her teeth, smiling at a senator's wife. "Just stay close to Noah." Noah was sitting at the family table, coloring in a book, flanked by 4 guards Darian trusted with his life, men Sal had no influence over. Sal was there too. He was near the entrance, talking into his earpiece, looking the part of the loyal underboss. He gave Darian a nod. Darian nodded back. The deception was perfect. The trap was set for 10 p.m. At 9:55 p.m., the lights in the ballroom flickered. "Here we go," Darian whispered. He squeezed Tess's hand. "Go to Noah. Now." Tess moved. She reached the table just as the main power cut out. The ballroom plunged into darkness. Screams erupted. "Get the boy!" A voice roared from the darkness. Muzzle flashes lit up the room like strobe lights. Gunfire erupted near the entrance. It wasn't the precise extraction Sal had planned. It was chaos. "Tess! Get down!" One of the loyal guards shoved Tess and Noah under the heavy table. The sound of bullets chewing into the wood above them was deafening. Noah screamed, covering his ears. Tess wrapped herself around him, burying his head in her chest. "It's okay. I've got you," she chanted, though she was terrified. Through the chaos, she saw Darian. He wasn't hiding. He was standing in the center of the room, firing with deadly precision at a group of men rushing the stage. But then, she saw something Darian didn't. Sal wasn't at the entrance. He was moving through the panic, flanking Darian from the left. He had a suppressed pistol drawn, and he wasn't aiming at the attackers. He was aiming at Darian's back. "Darian, behind you!" Tess screamed. Her voice was lost in the noise. She didn't think. She scrambled out from under the table, grabbing a heavy silver champagne bucket. Sal raised his gun. Tess sprinted. She was 20 feet away. 10. Just as Sal squeezed the trigger, Tess threw the heavy bucket with all her might. It struck Sal in the elbow. His shot went wide, grazing Darian's shoulder instead of piercing his heart. Darian spun around. He saw Sal. He saw Tess standing exposed in the middle of the firefight. "Sal!" Darian roared, a sound of pure betrayal and rage. Sal, realizing he'd missed, didn't hesitate. He grabbed the nearest human shield, Tess. He wrapped an arm around her throat, jamming the gun against her temple. "Drop it, Dom!" Sal screamed, dragging Tess backward toward the service exit. "Drop it, or the girl paints the floor!" The room froze. The Moretti hitman had been neutralized by Darian's guards, but the traitor was still standing. Darian stood panting, blood seeping through his white tuxedo shirt. His gun was leveled at Sal's head. His hand did not shake, but his eyes were filled with a terror Tess had never seen. "Let her go, Sal," Darian said, his voice dropping to a demonic growl. "And I'll let you die quickly." "You've gone soft, boss," Sal spat, backing through the double doors. "You let a skirt ruin everything. I did this for the family." Sal dragged Tess into the service corridor. The elevator doors were open. He shoved her inside and hit the button for the parking garage. "No!" Darian sprinted toward them. The doors slid shut just as Darian crashed against them. Tess was alone in the elevator with the man who wanted to kill her. She looked at the gun in his hand, then at the knife hidden in her dress. Sal was panting, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Stupid bitch," he muttered, looking at the floor numbers. "You should have stayed a waitress." He turned to pistol whip her. Tess didn't wait. She hiked up her dress, ripped the knife from the sheath, and drove it into Sal's thigh. Sal howled, dropping the gun. Tess kicked it away. The elevator dinged. Level B2, garage. The doors opened. Tess scrambled out, but Sal grabbed her ankle. She kicked him in the face, breaking his nose, and rolled onto the concrete floor. She scrambled to her feet, running into the dark, echoing garage. "I'm going to kill you!" Sal screamed, limping after her, blood trailing down his leg. Tess hid behind a concrete pillar. She was trapped, no phone, no weapon, and a killer hunting her in the dark. Suddenly, tires screeched. A black Maserati roared down the ramp, headlights blinding. It drifted around the corner, slamming into Sal and pinning him against the wall. The car stopped. The door flew open. Darian stepped out. He didn't look at Sal, who was groaning, crushed from the waist down. He walked straight to Tess. He was covered in blood. Some his, mostly others. He looked like the angel of death. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, scanning her frantically. I'm okay," Tess shook. Darian pulled her into a bone-crushing hug. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent. For a moment, the Mafia Don was gone, and there was just a terrified man holding the woman he loved. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. "Darian," Tess said, pulling back. "Sal, is he—" Darian turned to look at the traitor pinned by the car. Sal was still alive, coughing blood. Darian's face hardened into granite. "Get in the car, Tess. Close your eyes." "Darian, don't get in the car." Tess obeyed. She sat in the passenger seat, closing the heavy door. She squeezed her eyes shut. She heard Sal beg, "Dom, please, we're family. Please." "Family." Darian's voice was muffled through the glass. "Family doesn't touch what's mine." A single shot rang out, then silence. Darian got back into the car. He put it in reverse, freeing the body, and peeled out of the garage. He drove with one hand. The other was gripping Tess's hand so tight her fingers went numb. "Where are we going?" Tess asked, watching the city lights blur by. "Home?" "No," Darian said. "Home isn't safe anymore. The Morettis know where we live. We're going to the safe house." "And Noah?" "He's already en route with Luca. We'll meet them there." Darian looked at her, his eyes burning. "The war has started, Tess, and there is no going back." The safe house sat on a jagged promontory overlooking the churning black waters of Lake Michigan, 30 miles north of the city limits. It wasn't a home. It was a bunker disguised as modern architecture, cold concrete, bulletproof glass, and a silence so deep it felt heavy. When Darian's Maserati screeched up the gravel drive, dragging the bumper where he'd clipped the highway divider, the engine was smoking. Luca was already on the porch, his face grim, an assault rifle slung across his chest. He didn't ask questions. He saw the blood soaking through Darian's white shirt and the terrifying pallor of Tess's face. "Get him inside," Luca commanded, abandoning his post to wrench the car door open. "Noah, run to the panic room in the basement. The code is your birthday. Go." Noah, clutching the hem of his pajama shirt, looked at his father. Darian was barely conscious, his head lolling against the leather headrest, his breath coming in shallow, wet rasps. "Go, Noah," Tess choked out, pushing the boy gently but firmly toward the heavy oak doors. "We'll be right there." As the boy disappeared into the house, Tess and Luca hauled Darian's dead weight into the sterile, white living room. They laid him on the leather sofa, which immediately stained crimson. The bullet from the gala had done more damage than Tess initially thought. The adrenaline was fading, and his body was going into shock. "The med kit is in the kitchen island. Bottom drawer," Luca barked, tearing open Darian's shirt. "I have to secure the perimeter. We have maybe 10 minutes before Moretti's men track the car." "You're leaving me alone with him?" Tess panicked, her hands trembling as she grabbed the heavy medical box. "You were a nurse, weren't you?" Luca checked the magazine of his rifle. "Save him. I'll keep them off the porch." Luca vanished into the night. Tess was alone with the most dangerous man in Chicago, who was currently helpless and bleeding out on a rug worth more than her life's earnings. Tess forced herself to breathe. She snapped on a pair of latex gloves. "Don't think about the hitmen. Don't think about the gunshots. Darian," she whispered, slapping his cheek lightly. "Stay with me." Darian's eyes fluttered open. They were glassy, unfocused. "Tess," he groaned, his hand fumbling to find hers. His grip was weak. "The boat, under the cliff. Take Noah. Leave me." "Shut up," Tess said, pouring antiseptic directly into the jagged wound on his shoulder. Darian hissed through his teeth, his back arching off the sofa. "I am not leaving you," Tess said, her voice finding a steel she didn't know it possessed. "You promised me protection. You don't get to break a contract just because you're bleeding." She worked quickly, driven by a terrifying clarity. She clamped the bleeder, cleaned the shredded tissue, and began to stitch the skin. Every time the needle pierced his flesh, Darian flinched, but he didn't cry out. He watched her face with an intensity that unsettled her. He was watching her save his life, realizing that the power dynamic between them had fundamentally shifted. She wasn't his employee anymore. She was his lifeline. Just as she tied the final knot on the suture, the first window shattered. Crash. The sound was like an explosion in the quiet house. Tess screamed, dropping the scissors. "Lights!" Luca's voice roared over the comms system. The house plunged into darkness as Luca cut the main breaker. The only light came from the moonlight filtering through the shattered floor-to-ceiling windows. "Get down!" Darian growled. Despite his blood loss, he rolled off the sofa, dragging Tess down to the floor behind the heavy kitchen island. He reached for his ankle, but his gun was gone. Noah had it. "Here." Tess slid the shotgun she had grabbed from the hall rack across the floor to him. Darian looked at it, then at her. "You know how to use this?" "Point and shoot, right?" Tess whispered, her teeth chattering. "God, I love you," Darian muttered, mostly to himself. He racked the slide. Outside, the night erupted. Muzzle flashes lit up the tree line like strobe lights. Bullets chewed into the concrete exterior of the house. Luca was returning fire from the roof, his rifle cracking rhythmically. But he was one man against an army. "They're flanking." Darian analyzed the sound of the gunfire instantly. "They're suppressing Luca, so a team can breach the back door." He tried to stand, but his legs buckled. The blood loss was too severe. He slid back down, cursing violently. "I can't fight," he admitted, the realization crushing him. He looked at Tess, his eyes filled with a desperate, terrified plea. "Tess, you have to get to the panic room. If they get in, Moretti doesn't take prisoners. He'll make it hurt." "I'm not going to the panic room," Tess said. She looked at the knife block on the counter. She looked at the heavy cast-iron skillet on the stove. "This is our house. These are our rules." The back door exploded inward with a deafening boom. Splinters of wood rained down the hallway. Heavy footsteps crunched on the glass. 1, 2, 3 men. Darian raised the shotgun, resting the barrel on the edge of the island. Boom! The lead attacker dropped, his chest a ruin. The other two scrambled for cover in the hallway. "Valenti!" A voice echoed from the shadows. It wasn't a grunt. It was the gravelly, mocking baritone of Don Moretti himself. "I know you're bleeding, boy. I can smell it." "Go to hell, Moretti!" Darian shouted, firing another round to keep them pinned. "I'm sending you there first." Moretti laughed. "And then I'm going to find that little boy of yours. What's his name? Noah. I wonder if he screams like his mother did." Something inside Darian broke. He roared, trying to stand up to charge the hallway, but his body failed him. He collapsed, the shotgun skittering away across the floor, out of reach. Moretti stepped into the moonlight of the living room. He was a giant of a man, wearing a trench coat, holding a suppressed pistol with casual arrogance. He saw Darian lying prone. He smiled. "End of the line, Darian." Moretti raised the gun. He didn't see Tess. Tess had crawled around the other side of the island. She didn't have a gun. She didn't have the strength of a hitman. But she had the element of surprise, and she had the rage of a woman who had found a family only to see it threatened by a monster. She lunged. She didn't go for his weapon. She slammed a heavy crystal decanter of whiskey into the side of Moretti's head with every ounce of force she possessed. The glass shattered. Alcohol sprayed everywhere. Moretti staggered, stunned, blood pouring into his eye. He roared, blindly swinging his backhand. His fist connected with Tess's temple. Tess flew backward, crashing into the refrigerator. Her vision went black for a second. When she shook her head to clear it, she saw Moretti recovering, wiping the blood from his eyes. He turned the gun toward her. "Stupid girl," Moretti spat. "I was going to save you for last." Darian was crawling toward the shotgun, but he was too slow. He screamed Tess's name, a sound of pure agony. Moretti tightened his finger on the trigger. Click. The sound of a hammer striking a primer echoed in the room. Moretti frowned. He pulled the trigger again. Click. His gun had jammed. A fragment of the crystal decanter had lodged in the slide mechanism. He looked at the gun, then at Tess. He reached into his coat for a backup knife. "Hey!" A small, trembling voice cut through the silence. Moretti, Tess, and Darian all froze. They turned to the hallway entrance. Standing there, in his dinosaur pajamas, was 6-year-old Noah. He was shaking so hard his teeth were clicking together. But in his 2 small hands, he held the pearl-handled revolver Darian kept in the bedroom safe. The barrel was wavering, pointing generally at Moretti. "Noah, run!" Darian screamed. Moretti laughed. It was a cruel, wet sound. "Look at that! The puppy wants to play." He took a step toward the boy, knife in hand. "Give me the gun, kid, and I'll make it quick." Noah didn't run. He looked at Tess, who was slumped against the fridge, bleeding. He looked at his father, helpless on the floor. The boy who hadn't spoken for a year, who was afraid of loud noises, took a deep breath. He stopped shaking. "Leave my family alone," Noah whispered. He squeezed the trigger. The recoil knocked the 60-pound boy backward onto the floor. The shot went wide, shattering a vase. Moretti lunged. Noah fired again from the floor. And again. And again. He didn't aim. He just pulled until the cylinder clicked empty. One of the wild shots caught Moretti in the throat. The Don of the Moretti crime family stopped. He clutched his neck, his eyes wide with shock. He gurgled, blood bubbling between his fingers. He swayed for a moment, looking at the small boy who had ended his reign, and then collapsed face first onto the marble floor. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Tess scrambled across the floor, ignoring her own dizziness. She reached Noah first. She grabbed the hot gun from his hands and threw it away, pulling him into her chest. "I've got you! I've got you!" she sobbed, rocking him back and forth. Noah wasn't crying. He was staring blankly at the body. Darian dragged himself over. He wrapped his massive arms around both of them, burying his face in Tess's neck and Noah's hair. The three of them sat there in the dark, amidst the glass and the blood, a tangle of limbs and trauma. The front door opened. Luca limped in, his uniform torn. He scanned the room, saw Moretti's body, and lowered his rifle. He looked at his boss, the waitress, and the boy. He saw the look in Darian's eyes, not of triumph, but of profound, life-altering relief. "It's over, boss," Luca said quietly. The others ran when they heard Moretti fall. "It's done." Darian kissed Tess's forehead. Then he kissed Noah's hands, the hands that had been forced to do something no child should ever do. "We're done," Darian whispered, his voice breaking. "We're out. No more." 1 year later. The hills of Tuscany were a different world compared to the grey steel of Chicago. The air smelled of rosemary, heated earth, and lemons. The villa sat on a gentle slope, surrounded by vineyards that stretched as far as the eye could see. It wasn't a fortress. There were no guards at the gate, no cameras in the trees. The only sound was the buzzing of cicadas and the distant laughter of a child. Tess sat on the stone patio, her legs tucked under her. She was reading a book, a glass of dark red wine resting on the table beside her. She looked different. The tension that used to live in her shoulders was gone. Her hair was longer, lighter from the Italian sun. "He's fast," a voice rumbled from the doorway. Tess smiled without looking up. "He gets that from you. He certainly didn't get his running skills from me." Darian stepped out into the sunlight. He wore linen trousers and a loose white shirt, sleeves rolled up. The scar on his eyebrow was still there, a permanent reminder of the life he had left behind, but the hardness in his face had softened. He didn't look like a Don anymore. He looked like a father. He walked over and kissed the top of her head, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. They watched Noah running through the rows of grapevines, chasing a golden retriever they had named Lucky. "Luca called," Darian said softly, sitting down opposite her. Tess stiffened slightly. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," Darian assured her, taking her hand. "The business in Chicago is fully sold off. The legitimate assets are in trust for Noah. The other assets have been dissolved. We are officially ghosts, Tess." Tess let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 12 months. "So no one is looking for us? No one who wants to stay alive?" Darian smirked, a flash of the old danger appearing for just a second before vanishing. "But mostly, they just don't care. The vacuum was filled. We are yesterday's news." "I like being yesterday's news," Tess said. "I like being boring." Darian laughed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Tess's heart skipped a beat. "Darian?" "I never did this properly," Darian said, his voice turning serious. He got down on one knee on the warm flagstones. "In the restaurant I bought you. In the safe house, I needed you. But here, I just want you." He opened the box. Inside was a vintage ring, simple gold with a diamond that caught the Tuscan sun. "Tess Holloway," Darian said, his grey eyes shining with an emotion deeper than the ocean. "You saved my son. You saved my life. But more importantly, You saved my soul. Will you marry me? For real this time." Tess looked at him. She thought about the waitress who was afraid of her landlord. She thought about the woman who cracked a decanter over a mob boss's head. And she looked at the man who had burned his own kingdom to the ground just to keep her safe. Tears pricked her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Darian." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood up and pulled her into a kiss that tasted of wine and forever. "Ew! Gross!" They broke apart, laughing. Noah was standing at the edge of the patio, making a face, the dog panting beside him. The boy looked healthy, happy, and crucially, unafraid. "Come here, you rascal!" Darian yelled, chasing after him. Darian caught his son, swinging him into the air while the dog barked and danced around them. Tess watched them, her hand resting on her chest, feeling the steady beat of her heart. She remembered the rule of the underworld. Never touch the family. She smiled, taking a sip of wine. They had broken every rule in the book. They had spilled blood, lost friends, and nearly died in the dark. But looking at her boys laughing under the golden sun, Tess knew the truth. Some rules were meant to be broken. But this family was unbreakable. And that is the incredible, heart-pounding conclusion to the story of the waitress and the Mafia Don. From the shattered glass of the onyx room to the sun-drenched hills of Italy, Tess and Darian proved that loyalty isn't about who you work for. It's about who you're willing to bleed for. I honestly got chills writing that final scene with Noah in the safe house. It's a heavy reminder that violence always leaves a mark, even when you win. If you enjoyed this marathon of a story, please do me a huge favor and smash that like button. It tells the YouTube algorithm that you want more long-form, intense storytelling like this, and I want to hear from you. Do you think Darian deserved a happy ending after everything he did in his past? Or was his redemption earned through saving his family? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when the next drama drops. I have a story coming up next week about a billionaire who fakes his own death to find out who really loves him. And trust me, you don't want to miss that one. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.